Our next panel considers Asia's energy destiny. Joining us now is Jin Liqun, president of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, Luhut Binsar Pandjaitan, Indonesia's coordinating minister for Maritime Affairs and Investment, Yeo Bee Yin, member of parliament for Bakri, Malaysia, and former Malaysian Minister of Energy, Science, Technology, Environment, and Climate Change, and Zhang Yuzhuo, chairman of Sinopec. The moderator is Haslinda Amin, chief international correspondent for Southeast Asia for Bloomberg Television.
Scarlett, thank you so much for that. Now, Asia is the largest carbon emitter in the world. Not surprising, given that it is also the largest, or rather the fastest growing region in the world. In fact, last year, it accounted for 2/3 of global growth. But, and this is a big but, the region is also the largest investor in clean energy. Some suggesting perhaps it will channel between $1.5 to $3 trillion over the next decade. So can Asia meaningfully wean itself away from coal, even as it tries to feed its insatiable appetite for power? What will shape the region's power transformation to cleaner supplies? And can Asia work together on clean energy, or will it be yet another area of conflict? Let's dive deeper. But before that, here's a polling question, and we'd love for you to take part and give us your views. And the polling question is, can Asia remain the world's fastest growing economy and reduce its emissions at the same time? A, it can't remain the fastest growing without increasing emission. B, it can. China's 2060 net zero goal shows the way. C, it can. Technology will solve the problem. And D, it shouldn't have to. Industrialized countries should shoulder the burden. Please do vote. I will come back to the question slightly later. Now, let's get to our panelists. President Jin Liqun, this is for you. We often talk about how Asia is contributing the most to carbon emissions in the world. This is the cost of economic success. But when you take a look at the cumulative global emissions for Asia, it is lower than Europe, lower than the US. To what extent do you think will Asian economies be willing to take on the burden of cutting emissions today?
Thank you, Haslinda. Very nice to see you again. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for me to share with you our AIIB's views with regard to the transition from high carbon to low carbon, eventually to zero carbon economy. And the simple answer is we can do it. What matters is the determination, the attempt to do it. And then we should work out concrete roadmaps and technical measures, and of course, with the full support of the Asian people. But let me say just a few words about AIIB's role. As you may know, we have an energy strategy, Sustainable Energy for Asia, which was approved by our board in 2017, with a little bit amendment in 2018. Except in few areas, this strategy still is very much important in guiding us forward to helping the client countries of our bank to move towards zero carbon economy. We know it takes time, but it is possible. And since this is the broad discussion, and I will not try to dominate the conversation, but let me share with you some of the very important concepts. The first is, how can we balance the ever-increasing demand for energy against the challenges of climate change and environmental issues? Because you see, the Asian economy is the fastest growing economy in the world, and a large number of people have been lifted out of poverty. And this would directly be translated into the higher demand for energy consumption. But under such kind of circumstances, how could we make sure that higher consumption, high demand for energy will not lead to high greenhouse gas emissions? So as a development bank, we are trying our very best to guide developing countries to move forward to a zero carbon economy. And this is our major objective, and I think it's our international responsibility. But you may note that the energy strategy of 2017 does not exclude coal from the financing of AIB. The bank will finance investments that are demonstrated by the country's transition towards a low carbon economy. But 2 or 3 years from now, things have changed. So we are reconsidering the energy strategy. Next year, if we do some of the revisions of the energy strategy, I can tell you we will definitely make a ramp up of efforts to do more towards moving from a zero carbon economy. And recently, you may notice that the AIB among the climate change investment framework was an important effort between the multilateral institution and a private company to push for the implementation of Paris Agreement. And I announced during the launch that we will not finance any coal-based power plants, nor any projects which are functionally related to coal. And this is my announcement, and we are going to do it. So if you look at what we have been doing over the last 5 years, even though the energy strategy does not rule out altogether of financing for coal, we have no coal projects at all. Now, next year, if we review the energy strategy, it will be even clearer that coal would be out. Let me stop here.
President Jin, great optimism there. I want to bring in MPO at this stage. MPO, President Jin says we can do it. Sure, we can. The thing is, the truth of the matter is, becoming carbon neutral is not that straightforward. We've heard from India, we heard from a Tata Group CEO or chairman rather earlier that, for India, as it grows, its carbon footprint will grow as well. Your thoughts on just how challenging it is and where we are in this conversation?
Yeah. So from our experience in Malaysia, what we are looking in any energy policies, we are always looking into security, affordability, and sustainability. Unfortunately, in many developing countries, especially for leaders that need to win the next election, a lot of preoccupation is on how do we get the accessibility, how do we get it more secure, and for a lot of developing countries like in Malaysia, is that we are talking about affordability of them. There is a gap between what we want to do now and what is needed in the future. So one thing I think that is very important is first for financing. Second is the technology. I am a big believer of technology. I believe that this thing can be done when there is enough technology in terms of battery, smart grid, electrification technology that is efficient, that we will be able to actually move the sustainability in this side of the spectrum to the side of affordability. And then that is when will have a breakthrough. And I'm very optimistic and looking at how things are going right now at the rate of the technology breakthrough, I am actually very optimistic. So the only thing that policymakers need to do in Asia is to be able to say that we will drive and innovate our policies to make sure that we take into account innovation and also to encourage innovation so to happen in energy industry.
But having said that, MPU, when you take a look at renewables, they are cheaper than ever before. You take a look at batteries, wind turbines, they are much, much more affordable now than before. Is that enough, though? Is that enough to move the needle, move the dial for Asian countries, stop building new coal-fired power plants, for instance?
So, for example, now, when we do energy or power sector planning, you are doing it based on the life of a coal plant. So, for example, right now, even we say that there's no new coal plant, so you will still take time to phase out. So now, what we are comparing is the price of so coal plant usually is the base load. That means you need to have, even if renewable energy is cheaper, but it's intermittent. But what you want to replace is a coal plant that needs to be always ever ready. So the discussion right now is, can you now have solar plus battery, have a levelized cost of energy that is lower than the base load in Malaysia at this moment? although the intermittent, that means the solar production, is at 15 cents per kilowatt hour, which is at the same price as an average coal price, but it will not be able to replace coal. It can only replace what we call a peak demand. That is when it is at when the energy demand is at the highest during the noon time. So that is what we can do. But in terms of replacing, in the next step forward is to how do we replace coal plus battery will still be cheaper than coal. That is when you will see the big breakthrough. For Malaysian context is that we, in 2024, we will decide on the next power plant. It is from now until 4 years' time that there is a lot of room for technology to grow. And then by 2024, then we will then decide, the policymakers will decide what kind of plant is going ahead. So I am very optimistic that by 2024, coal will no longer be the cheapest option, the least cost option, what we call least cost option for Malaysia.
Luhut Panjaitan, I want to bring you into this conversation. I mean, Indonesia is still very reliant on coal, even though it's added renewables like solar, wind, geothermal into its energy mix. What's driving the pace of change to low carbon, if at all, in Indonesia?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, let me begin by telling you that coal fire still we still have in Indonesia, because I don't think that we can change immediately from coal to the other alternative energy. But what we are doing right now, we promote very much renewable energy like geothermal, hydropower, wind, and some others, because we are quite rich on that. And number two, we have also program because we understand that we are leading on the carbon credit. You see, like mangrove. We have a mangrove restoration program for the next 4 years. 730,000 hectares we're going to replanting. So this is, I think, one project right now ongoing. And number two, we have also peatland program. How do we restore the peatland? This is also contribute a lot. And moratorium for deforestation, moratorium for the palm oil. And also we have coal, restoration for the coral reef. We are doing now restoration of coral reef in Bali, for instance. This year, 200 hectares, and next year we're going to do 2,000 hectares. So this is, I think, the way we do it. We understand hydropower is quite cheap compared to the other energy. Hydropower that we're going to build right now, the 12,000 megawatt in North Kalimantan and 27,000 megawatt in Papua, the price could go around 2 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour. So we can produce green energy, and we can generate also green product because of the green energy. It is going to happen anytime, maybe 2029. So right now, there's final study on this. So ladies and gentlemen, you cannot just cut, don't do this, don't do that. But what's the alternative? I think technology is an alternative. We are promoting right now our program on lithium battery. We are the largest nickel ore reserve on the earth. So we are preparing right now lithium battery. We engage CATL. We signed already agreement with CATL as well as the LG, because this is, I think, very, very important. We have a high grade, low grade of the nickel ore. So to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, we are agree absolutely to use renewable energy, because this is very important for the next generation of Indonesia. We are not talking only for the other countries, but first priority, we don't want to make any policy could jeopardize the next generation of Indonesia. We are not only talking, we are executing already. So we are, if you visit Indonesia right now, I give you example, a lot of right now solar panel building and wind power, and also hydropower and geothermal. We have like 20,000 megawatt geothermal, and we have around 90,000 geothermal, including the spring water. So we are moving quite well, and renewable energy is alternative, and also by our target, our commitment to Paris Agreement 29%, and we believe that we can go even higher than that if we can move very quick today. So that's the thing we are doing in Indonesia. The value, we understand also the value of carbon storage is around 891 tons of carbon per hectare, equivalent to 29 gigatons of carbon for all mangrove Indonesia. So we can contribute a lot to this.
Right. Mr. Zhang, to that end, I mean, oil companies have been under a lot of pressure to pivot. Sinopec itself has reallocated resources in recent years into hydrogen. How do you see, what's the viewpoint from oil companies to look beyond becoming just oil companies, but energy companies instead?
Well, thank you, Haslinda, the host. Thank you for your question. I'd like to provide an answer from Sinopec on the question of the energy solutions for the future development of Asia. I'd like to say a few points. First of all, you mentioned that Sinopec in the past was focused on petroleum and chemicals. That was our main business, yes. But now we have expanded our major business and operations into also clean energy and high-end chemical materials. I personally have had a long history in this industry. And as for the energy pattern that boosts Asia's economic growth in the future, my personal opinion is that in the short term, we will try to cleanify the traditional fuel. In the midterm, we're going to escalate and expand the adoption of clean energy so as to improve and boost the economic development of Asia. I believe that all the countries are working hard nowadays to enhance the adoption of clean energy or cleaner use of traditional energy. But of course, different countries have different usage patterns of fossil fuels. And fossil fuels still account for a major portion of energy consumption. Lately, BP provided a statistic last year. We can see that for the non-recyclable energies, petroleum accounted for 33.1, and coal 27%, and natural gas 24.2%. So fossil fuel accounts for 85% altogether. China is a large consumption country of the energy. In the year 2019, coal accounted for 57.7%, while petroleum 18.1%, natural gas 8%. That's a total of 85%, just like the rest of the world. So based on the current situation, we should also look at the different division of labor along the value chain of all the countries. China is a continent with a lot of population and with a growing economy. So there is a huge demand for energy. And most of the Asian countries occupy the chains of manufacturing and energy-intensive, resource-intensive industries along the value chain. So their development mode will require fossil fuel, at least for the time being. It is not realistic to 100% get rid of the fossil fuels. So they should adopt advanced technologies to make a cleaner use of the traditional fossil fuels. I have been in this industry for many years, like I said. So I believe try to reduce the carbon emission and to use them in a cleaner way is reasonable and viable. Actually, that's what Sinopec has been doing in the past. We have been trying to reduce the carbon emission of such fossil fuels. And lately, Sinopec and some other energy companies in China have been working together
Let me just follow up on that, Mr. Zhang.
make a
How
better use
does
of the fossil fuels.
Sinopec view its role in the energy transition in China?
In this transition period, Sinopec will try to use natural gas as the major source of energy. And we also want to work very hard on clean energy. We are the biggest energy company in China. Clean energy, and many provinces are promoting the use of clean energy. Now, producing clean energy, there are many ways to do this. We can use less fossil fuel or also renewable energy. In the short term, we have to work first on clean and then work on renewables.
Right.
Recently, and also, we're also working on energy generated in the maritime areas, and also and using in our gas stations. We want to add. We have the biggest network of gas stations in China. We have 30,000 gas stations, and we want to turn them into places where you can add gas, add gasoline, and also charge electric vehicles.
I'd like to jump in here. MPU, let's bring you into this conversation. I mean, we talked about how, in terms of cumulative perspective, Asia is actually consuming less than the US as well as Europe. I mean, in fact, Asia consumes about 10% of what the US is consuming. What are Asia's comparative advantages and disadvantages when it comes to energy transition versus the Western world? MPU, your thoughts?
Yeah. So, but before we go into that question, I just want to echo on Pak Luhut's description on the carbon emission, especially on reforestation and mangrove. A lot of people are thinking of how do we do the technology for carbon storage, etc. But one of the things that we often ignore is that we should actually restore our carbon sink. So going into that, how do we, is that fair? A developing country, people are asking us to cut our carbon, but we need to develop. Is that fair? So I went to, the first time when I was a minister, I just want to share, I went to this conference of party for the climate change conference. And then I realized that people are negotiating about common but differentiated responsibilities. The developed countries ask us to cut the carbon. The developing countries say, you must pay to get us to cut the carbon. I think the discussion is going nowhere. And it actually, year by year, we are discussing in COP, and then to realize that we cannot have that kind of speed to get to it. So how do we go about changing, making Asia to be able to transform? Two things. One is that we actually don't rely on common but differentiated responsibilities because the developed countries, they have a lot of problems to face. The other one is that possible for the RE100 companies to say this? That because they have a lot of supply chain that is Asian companies, then they say, all our suppliers should also comply to RE100. That will make market big enough for innovation and scale. And the third one would be that that how do we go about saying that comparative advantage? There's a lot because there is still a lot of places in Asia that needs to be electrified. That means their current with the current technology, as we plan, that we will choose the cleaner one. So I think one of the comparative advantage of Asia is to be able to say now we can use a cleaner technology, a cleaner energy to meet our growing demand. So I am of the view that only market and technology will be able to drive change that is quick enough for us to meet the Paris Agreement goal.
I guess the question now is for Pak Luhut. How then do you expedite the process in Indonesia?
Well, I think we have a regulation already to reduce using the coal energy, but I don't think that we can stop it immediately, because we have to look at also we invested already quite much on the coal energy, but we have program to do this and to give incentive for like geothermal, for instance, and we have already program for the hydropower. But in the same time, like I mentioned earlier about mangrove program, about the coral reef and forestry. That's I think our policy. So again, like I can mention to you, like in eastern part of Indonesia, we have like 2.1 gigawatt diesel. We're going to replace this by using solar panel. This is, I think, going to happen within 2 years' time. So this is again is very important. But again, like I mentioned, you cannot be just cut it. But we have to do it gradually. But we have already programmed. Then we are doing now. We are ongoing now. So again, we care very much about environment. But I don't think that we can have same policy like in Singapore or some other countries. Indonesia consists of so many islands, so we have to do it a different island, different maybe policy or strategy to
And
reduce
also one of
problems.
the challenges for Indonesia is land acquisition. President Jin Liqun, China surprised the world with its 2060 net zero target when it announced it during its 5 and 15-year plan. Some called it bold, some called it ambitious, others were skeptical. How do you see China's shift to clean energy and energy independence? How will it shape the world economy?
You see, President Xi's declaration at the recent United Nations General Assembly is a very important one. And we in AIB thinks this policy initiative is the most important, or one of the most important, over the last 4 decades since reform and opening up was launched. This is monumental. And if you look at the gap between European countries and China in terms of economic development, technology, living standard, you should appreciate very much China's ambition of achieving carbon neutrality by 2060, only 10 years later than European countries. So in this regard, I think we need international cooperation. China does not set any conditions on this objective. China will just do it, working on this ambitious objective. And I think moving forward, cooperation in technology, in policies, would be very much important. Some people commented that while the move was a surprise but a welcome declaration, they said there were no details as to how this will be implemented over the next 40 years. And some other people said that big question remains. China's definition of carbon neutrality is not well defined from the short announcement, and that further, no roadmap was offered as to how this will be achieved. So I think President Xi's announcement at United Nations as General Assembly's keynote speech is not the right place for China to elaborate its roadmap to achieve this objective. As you know, China is now preparing for the 14th five-year plan, and I think this would feature prominently in the 14th five plan and 15th and beyond. So China made such a kind of ambitious objective, which should be applauded, commended by the international community. But if you look at China's track record over the years, if there's any big policy initiative, China would definitely achieve it. So I think if people are interested about the details, the roadmaps, they can see China's, concrete steps in the future. But I want to highlight one point, Haslinda, I think it's very much important, is the determination to do it. So we should focus on transition, because transition is important, right?
President Jin, it's true. Transition is important. Mr. Zhang, perhaps we can glean something from you. In your view, how is China's power generation, or rather power generation mix will look like in the next 10, 20, 30 years? What are we expecting to see? How big will hydrogen, for instance, be as an energy source for China? Give us a sense of what we can see.
Well, President Xi Jinping announced during the UN General Assembly China's goals to peak its carbon dioxide emission by 2030 and the realization of carbon neutrality by 2060. Now, you know that the energy industry is the major emitter of China's emission, accounting for 90%, with electricity generation, again, accounting for the major portion. So in the future, as for the percentage of power generation by renewable energies, I can give you my personal opinion. I myself have been working in the electricity industry for many years. Currently, I'm also working on petroleum. We can see that the next 10 years will witness a dramatic increase of the proportion of renewable energy. Now, the cost of solar and wind and the photovoltaic is even lower than coal generation. We can see that the cost of solar power is even less than 3 US cents. So this will further improve its adoption. In the western areas of China, we can also use the combination of wind power and solar power to further improve the percentage of renewable energy. I believe that in 10 years' time, the percentage of renewable energy will be able to reach 25%, and by 2030, this percentage will be further improved with many coal-powered plants and some other fossil fuel plants will be shut down. So by 2060, I believe we will be able to realize the goal of a carbon neutrality. So I think this is viable both technologically, and economically, and so that we can contribute to the mission, to the global goal.
MPO, earlier you expressed optimism, and so did President Jin, who said that we can do it. The question here, as you sit here listening to the conversation, do you get a sense that Asia can lead the way in clean energy? How much political will is there? How much commitment is there? We have China announcing its net zero target. We have Japan leading in hydrogen development. Can Asia really lead the way in clean energy?
I am very optimistic about this. One is because of the size of the market. The other one is that this is the highest growth place. So I think with China making that kind of commitment, it helps the countries around to make the same kind of commitment. Just now, I actually agree with President Jin. I think I myself am very confident that China can reach the ambitious goal because of the sheer size of the market. When you have the market and you have a government that says that you need to reach this, and you have the existing market, what is going to happen is innovation. And as we innovate, and the price will go down. So it depends on the innovation curve and the cost. So I'm very optimistic. But there is one thing that I think countries around in Asia needs to do, especially the big countries, is of how do you open up the grid? How do you make the grid competitive so to drive innovations among enterprises? Because right now our grid is quite regulated. Can we make it a bit more deregulated? And then to say that let's make this grid a competitive market, so that when you have a more efficient competitive market, that is when you drive innovation. So some of the things I think policymakers in Asia should think about is that how do we further liberalize our grid in our own way to make this to drive innovation. And I'm very optimistic.
Haslinda, let me
President
briefly
Jin,
comment on,
go ahead.
on this very important issue of the financial cost of renewables vis-a-vis the economic cost of the traditional fossil fuel. Now, the issue is some people say affordability, and I don't have to give you details about the ever reducing cost of renewables, which are undercutting the least costly traditional fossil fuels such as coal. But the problem is, it's the social policy. It's not really the affordability. Affordability could be misleading assumption. Because if you look at the costs of the renewables versus coal or fossil fuel, the price difference is not that much. And most of the people can afford. If they're very, very poor people, should be supported by the government through social policy. So I would say affordability is not a strong argument against quick transition from fossil fuel to renewables.
So I beg to differ on this because maybe it's in Malaysian context. So if you look at intermittency, that means your levelized, if you calculate your levelized cost of electricity on solar versus that of coal, then yes. But what if you need it as a base load? That means a replacement of coal. A replacement of coal can only happen when solar plus battery is lower than coal. We have not seen it in Malaysia. Probably it's already achieved in China, but I have not seen in any literature. I think we still need to make it affordable and then to be able to open up the market. The moment you make technology affordable and opening up a market that will dispatch energy at the least cost, that is when it is most efficient in driving the market, the whole power industry.
Mr. Chung, your views on making it affordable and tapping technology?
Can I add?
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I may add a little bit about this issue, climate change mitigation, not only talking about, about the electricity, but we are also talking energy, but we are also talking about the other than energy. It's just like how do we use as how do we use carbon, like mangrove, like some other, because if you're only talking about mitigation climate change from the energy sector, that cannot be comprehensive solution. So we like to see comprehensive solution on the climate change mitigation.
Well, we are fast running out of time, so I just want to do a round robin on the polling question. The question I'll repeat here, can Asia remain the world's fastest growing economy and reduce emissions at the same time? A, it can't remain the fastest growing without increasing its emissions. B, it can. China's 2060 net zero goal shows the way. C, it can. Technology will solve the problem. We get a sense of that in our discussion. And D, it shouldn't have to. Industrialized countries should shoulder the burden. MPO, your choice.
Yeah, mine is number 3, but technology plus a more deregulated market, more efficient power market. Yeah.
President Jin.
I agree. We agree with Ms. Yeo.
Well, that's one area where the two can agree on. Pak Luhut?
Yes.
But I think China is important in leading the way.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to work together. I don't think that one country can do it alone, but we have to establish cooperation among country in order to solve this problem. This is the global problem, and when we establish cooperation, I believe that we can solve this problem. That's my
Mr. Chung.
I totally agree. It looks like 3 is the good option. Government should provide more incentive in terms of a policy, and globally we should work together, join hands, and to push forward the technology advancement so as to attain the goal.
And on that very optimistic note, President Jin Liqun, MP Yeo Bee Yin, Luhut Panjaitan, Mr. Chung, thank you so much for, well, being so candid today. Thank you.
Let's turn now to today's moment of culture. It is titled A Shattered Reverie and features one dancer's response to the pandemic.